but it's basically sort of a policy of tipping, is actually quite repugnant to me.
Really? Because a lot of people are in favour of it because it rewards staff who aren't very well paid to begin with.
Well, I don't know if it does. I mean, I think there's more pressure and people feel more obliged to tip in, say, a posh restaurant where the staff are potentially better paid. I don't think you necessarily...
Yes, true.
I don't think that is the correct incentive. I think people feel pressure to tip in other ways, and I think it just goes to sort of Kiwi personalities. Like, I get quite, this might surprise you, but I feel under a lot of pressure now when I go and pay a bill in a restaurant, particularly when you're doing your FPOS and it comes up with, do you want an added tip? Because I sort of feel like the waitstaff or whoever's serving me knows I've pressed no, and they're probably thinking, cow. I just think in New Zealand we do pay a minimum wage. In theory, it should be a living wage. I want all of the costs associated with my meal as part of what the cost of the food is.
Okay, and Chris Gallivan agrees with you.
Yeah, absolutely, and I find it objectionable that Paula Bennett, as a minister, her personal attitude towards tipping, I've got no problem with, but tends to go and suggest that there should be a culture in New Zealand of tipping, and that's the way in which we'll get better services. I think it's just utterly outlandish.
The most trusted brand survey in New Zealand, the 2017 version released by Reader's Digest, Whittaker's Chocolate wins again for the 6th consecutive year. Are there any in here? It's a long list and I'm not going to go through it. Are there any in here that take your own fancy? Is there a brand you admire, not just because the owner's your brother-in-law?
Well, I was thrilled to see Whittaker's win it. I mean, these guys, it's great chocolate, and they could give a masterclass on how to brand and market a product. They're just geniuses. I was pleased to see St John's there. I mean, they do a great job without not much money, and also really thrilled to see Pam's. I mean, they've, got some great, lower value products that, taste just as good, if not better, than the expensive high quality brands.
Speaking of taste, can you believe that Vegemite will be restricted in New South Wales schools as the state government pushes for healthier canteens?
No, I think oh yes, no, it is Vegemite. Sorry, I thought you said Marmite. Yeah, I guess that'll be the high salt content, is it?
Yes, it is. But Nikki Bazant, who was answering a question earlier about Marmite and Vegemite, says she doesn't consider Vegemite unhealthy. It's not like you eat it in spoonfuls.
Well, this is right. I mean, it's just a light spread. It's, sort of added for flavour. I just think it's a bit of overkill myself.
But Chris Gallivan, seeing as you prefer Marmite, you don't really care about this.
No, not really. Yeah, I'm all about kids eating healthy, but I don't think as far as the list of public enemy number one as far as obesity and complications that come with sugary or salty foods, I wouldn't have thought that Vegemite or Marmite was top of the list.
They're advocating rice paper rolls, vegetable soup, hummus, and bean and corn salad to replace
those poor children.
to replace chocolate chip biscuits, chicken nuggets, and sausage rolls. You would think good luck to them, I suppose.
Indeed.
Very good, Victoria. Nice to have you on, and please come back again.
I hope I can. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Chris Gallivan, always a great pleasure. Thank you for the poem.
Loved it. No problem.
All right. And we're back with another panel and more panellists tomorrow. More news from Manchester, as John was talking about earlier, coming up on Checkpoint, and we'll see you back tomorrow on the panel.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight, terror following an Ariana Grande concert in Manchester. At least 19 people are dead, more than 59 injured in a suspected suicide bombing. We will speak to concert goers tonight. We will speak to witnesses to the explosion, and we will speak to reporters at the scene. Also tonight, embattled National MP Alfred Naro finally fronts up. Stephen Joyce prepares to deliver his first budget. That's on Thursday, of course. A call for the government to intervene and fast-track a Christchurch Cathedral decision. Amazing feedback on that last night. And disgraced former Heart of the City boss Alex Sweeney is granted parole after serving less than 2 years of his 5-year sentence for fraud. A busy Checkpoint. Thank you for being with us. We will be back after the 5 o'clock news.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Bat in Aho. The police are treating the blast that's killed 19 people at a pop concert in Manchester as a terror attack. Nearly 60 people were injured in the explosion at Manchester Arena, where the American singer Ariana Grande was performing. The blast sparked panic as thousands rushed for the exits, as the ABC's Phil Williams reports.
US performer Ariana Grande had just left the stage and thousands of concert goers were leaving the Manchester Arena when there was an explosion near the foyer. Police say they're treating the incident as a terrorist attack. Many of those inside the venue were young women and girls. There were eyewitness reports of crushing crowds as people attempted to flee. The British Prime Minister Theresa May says her thoughts are with the victims and their families and will soon hold an emergency meeting of the country's top security committee.
Phil Williams reporting. A fan inside the arena captured the moment the explosion occurred on her cell phone.
Oh my God. What's going on? What just happened? What's going on? Oh my God.
A cell phone recording of the Manchester Arena blast. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade says there's no indication at this stage any New Zealanders have been killed or injured. The New Zealand High Commission is in contact with local authorities and is advising New Zealanders in Manchester to contact their family to confirm they're safe. It says there are 14 New Zealanders registered on safe travel as being in the city at the moment. The Prime Minister says his thoughts are with the people of Manchester. Bill English says the events are still unfolding, but it's an awful tragedy.
Look, it's devastating for parents if the young ones go off to entertainment. No one expects them to lose their lives in such a cruel and unpredictable way.
Bill English. Islamic State supporters have been celebrating the attack on social media. Twitter accounts affiliated to IS have used hashtags referring to the blast to post celebratory messages, with some users encouraging similar attacks elsewhere. Some messages describe the attack as an act of revenge in response to airstrikes in Iraq and Syria. In other news, electronic monitors on ankles that can detect alcohol consumption are being trialled on some high-risk offenders and those on bail. A new law, which kicked in last week, allows the police and corrections to drug test people with abstinence conditions as part of their bail or sentence. The Corrections Minister, Louise Upston, says about 50 of the anklets are being trialled in the northern region over 2 years.
This one's activated by sweat, and that's basically what tells you whether or not they've breached their conditions. That's what I'm interested in. If someone's breaching the rules of their release, then we want to know about it, and the sooner we know about it, the sooner we can do something about it.
Louise Upston says offenders will also be subject to urine and breath alcohol tests. New legislation has been introduced to Parliament which will mean tenants who cause damage are liable for the cost of their landlord's insurance excess. The bill is in response to a Court of Appeal ruling that meant landlords were liable for any damage accidentally caused by tenants, whether or not they had insurance. The Building and Construction Minister says the changes are needed to ensure tenants have an incentive to take good care of a property, and so the landlord gets appropriate insurance. The bill will also give landlords easier access to test for methamphetamine, and tenants will be able to terminate their tenancy if methamphetamine is found at unsafe levels at the property. The Auditor-General is understood to be ready to meet political leaders to talk about the controversy around the convicted fraudster Joanne Harrison. There are questions about whether Martin Matthews should remain as Auditor-General after Harrison committed large-scale fraud while he was the Chief Executive of the Transport Ministry, where she was a senior manager. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
There's also an investigation into whether Joanne Harrison forced out staff members who raised red flags about her through a restructure. The Prime Minister Bill English says it would be inappropriate for the government to pass any judgment on the position of Mr Matthews as Auditor-General, as it's a parliamentary appointment. RNZ News understands Mr Matthews will offer to meet with party leaders to answer any questions about how he dealt with Harrison after concerns were raised about her conduct. Mr Matthews has not responded to repeated requests for comment. From Parliament, Jane Patterson.
It's 5 past 5. To sport, and the Warriors forward Jacob Lillyman has been named in the reserves in Queensland's State of Origin Rugby League side. Queensland begin their defence of their title against New South Wales, the game won next Wednesday. The veteran Billy Slater is missing from Queensland's lineup. Coach Kevin Walters says leaving Slater out of the team was the toughest decision of his career, but says it doesn't mean Slater's Origins days are over.
Difficult, particularly for all of us involved in the decision making around it, because Billy's been such a wonderful player for Queensland, and even when he wasn't playing last year, from a coaching point of view, I feel he went like above and beyond of what he's meant to do, so it was pretty tough.
Kevin Walters. The All Whites coach Anthony Hudson says he's spoilt for choice in picking his side for the upcoming Confederates Cup in Russia. The 23-man squad will be named on Friday. Hudson says he's pretty confident he knows who the final picks will be, but is keeping an eye on the Under-20 World Cup. That's the news.
A shock for Scott Dixon.
Two teenagers, according to the Indianapolis Metro Police, pretty much just came up to the car in the drive-thru, asked for his wallet and held him at gunpoint, and then they took off running.
The question of tipping.
I'm happy to tip people if I get good service, but I'm concerned about what might happen if it becomes the norm.
A tipping point.
They have allowed a huge shortfall to develop, and they have no moral claim on saying that they are the party that's doing wonderful things, because they're not.
Finding the balance. Susie Ferguson and Guy and Aspinall Morning Report, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, saving the amateur sports scene in New Zealand are the lines being blurred with the professional game. And after 10, New York medical musician and professional guitarist Andrew Schulman on the healing power of Bach and the Beatles. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, mostly cloudy. Isolated showers developing overnight, becoming widespread in Auckland and Coromandel tomorrow evening. Waikato to Kapiti, including Taupo, Taumarunui and Taihepe. Scattered showers turning to rain overnight with some heavy falls in the Tararua Ranges, clearing from the south tomorrow, then fine. Bay of Plenty, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, often cloudy, scattered showers tomorrow, clearing Bay of Plenty from evening. Wellington, Wairarapa, Marlborough and Nelson. A few showers turning to rain this evening, clearing from the south overnight, isolated showers tomorrow, mainly coastal. Bulla to Fiordland, a few showers in Fiordland, but rain further north, briefly heavy, becoming mainly fine everywhere tomorrow, but patchy drizzle in Bulla later. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, scattered showers, clearing tomorrow and becoming fine. And the Chatham Islands, a few showers. It's almost 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Oh my God. What's going on? What just happened? What's going on? Oh my God!
The concert was over, and at the Manchester Arena, where almost 21,000 people had gathered to watch a performance by Ariana Grande, the crowd was beginning to go home. Greater Manchester's Chief Constable Ian Hopkins describes what happened next.
At around 10:33 p.m, we received reports of an explosion at Manchester Arena in the city centre. This was at the conclusion of the Ariana Grande concert. Currently, we have 19 people confirmed to have lost their lives in the explosion, and around 50 casualties that are being treated at 6 hospitals across Greater Manchester. My thoughts are very much with those that have been injured and lost their lives and their loved ones at this terrible time. We are doing all that we can to support them. Officers from Greater Manchester Police and Emergency Services are working at the scene and are supporting those affected. We are currently treating this as a terrorist incident until we have further information. We are working closely with National Counter-Terrorism Policing Network and UK intelligence partners. This is clearly a very concerning time for everyone. We're doing all that we can, working with local and national agencies to support those affected as we gather information about what happened last night. As you will understand, we are still receiving information and updates, so we'll provide further detail when we have a clearer picture.
Greater Manchester's Chief Constable Ian Hopkins. The death toll remains at 19, but the number of seriously injured has now risen to 59. If confirmed as a terrorism attack, it would be the deadliest such attack in Britain since 52 people were killed by 4 suicide bombers on London's transport system in July 2005. The blast also came 2.5 weeks ahead of an election in which Prime Minister Theresa May is predicted by opinion polls to win a large majority. Ariana Grande herself is a hugely popular singer from the US. Her debut album entered the US charts at #1. Prior to her recording career, she was a teenage star on the Nickelodeon series Victorious. A short time ago, she announced her world tour was suspended and tweeted the following message: "Broken. From the bottom of my heart, I am so sorry. I don't have words." Many, although by no means all of her fans, are young women, teenage girls and younger, and reports suggest that core fan base was reflected by the crowd in Manchester. They'd had, by all accounts, a really wonderful night, and then the concert ended. At least one explosion appears to have happened in or near the stadium foyer. Andy Holey was waiting to collect his wife and daughter.
As I was waiting, an explosion went off and it threw me through the first set of doors, about 30 foot to the next set of doors. When I got up and looked round, there was about 30 people scattered everywhere. Some of them looked dead, might have been unconscious, but there was a lot of fatalities. So my first thing was to run in the stadium, try and find my wife and daughter.
Andy was running in, almost everyone else was running out, or trying to. Many of the crowd were teens. Karen Ford was there with her children.
Everyone just stopped and turned round, and then somebody shouted, "It's a bomb, run," and everyone just started running. Everybody was trying to push people up the stairs. There was a lady in a wheelchair trying to get away. She was absolutely hysterical, bless her. People were just pushing past her. So I held them back while she actually got out of the stairwell, and the person who was with her took them to safety. But the problem was a lot of children were there without parents. There was no one to calm them down, so everybody was just screaming and crying and pushing.
Karen Ford was there with her children. Josh Elliott was there with friends.
It was unreal. It was something out of a film. It was like everyone was just charging towards the doors. I said to my friend Beth and Tamar, and there was a little girl standing next to us. I just told everyone to get down, and everyone on our side of the seat got down onto the floor. And then everyone was just running out.
Andy, who we met before waiting in the foyer when the explosion happened, couldn't find his wife and daughter.
I looked at some of the bodies trying to find my family.
They weren't there. He found them safe and unhurt later, but what he saw was terrible.
There was definitely an explosion and there's definitely a lot of fatalities. It's shocking what happened, it's just carnage everywhere.
Carnage, chaos, panic, everyone making for the doors, including Karen Ford and her children.
As we came out of the stairwell, there wasn't a steward to be seen on the side that we were exiting. Everyone had just gone, so it was just chaos. Nobody was organising anybody to do anything. There were shoes on the floor where people had ran and the shoes had fallen off. So it was absolutely awful.
Concert goers trying to get out, mums and dads desperately trying to get in to find their teenage children. The explosion near an exit, so people were trying to leave, then turning back. Josh Elliott in the arena, not knowing where to go.
I've never been in a situation like that ever in my life. It's a lot of people. I know a lot of people always say it must be really swelled. It is the most horrific and terrifying thing that can ever happen to a person. It's I will never forget it.
And Andy Foley, who'd been looking for his wife and daughter and couldn't find them at first, checking the dead and injured to see if they were there. The vicissitudes of fate and the awful relief that followed.
Just felt sick to my stomach because every time I looked at a person, it was, as bad as it was for that person, I was praying it weren't my wife or daughter.
Andy was a dad waiting for his wife and daughter. 21-year-old student vet Jessica Howe was a fan, one of roughly 20,000 fans there. She was heading for the exit when the explosion happened, and then she told me everyone turned back towards her.
Loads of people started running back towards the stage, screaming and running as fast as they can to get back in. We then found another entrance out and started walking towards them. A city rooms, which is the main entrance, and there was quite a large smell of gas and smoke. then we got told to run and get out the other entrance, which is a smaller entrance and more of a back entrance. So we got out there, which, as we were leaving, there was a second explosion. And then as we got outside onto the main streets, there was gunfires as well. And then as we got out, we got escorted to a local hotel, which is on lockdown at the moment, as regards so we're not allowed to leave the hotel at the moment.
So
and that's what's happened.
So the explosion was near an exit, so people who were trying to leave at the end of the concert then turned round and ran back into the crowd. It must have been just so terrifying.
Yeah, everyone was screaming as loud as they could, like, get out, run as quick as you can, get out. Everyone just ran back inside to get to a different exit, because the main entrance, which is where a train station and a tram line is, that was all exploded and everything, yeah.
And did you see people with injuries?
Yeah, I've seen 2 people shot in the leg, one person with their whole T-shirt just covered in blood, and someone also shot in the stomach.
And so...
And the neck as well. Someone shot in the neck as well.
And so I imagine that was probably shrapnel. People are describing nuts and bolts and nails and that kind of thing from the explosion.
Yeah. It's been suspected as a nail bomb and a suicide bomber as well. Is what it's been expected as what's gone on.
And so where are you now? You're in a neighbouring hotel, are you, just on lockdown?
Yeah, we're in a neighbouring hotel with armed police on the doors. The hotel's just complete lockdown. No one's allowed to leave. Anyone who wants to come in needs to get searched.
And who are you with, Jessica?
I'm with one of my friends, Hayley, who I went to the concert with.
And you're all right, obviously not injured. You must be really traumatised, but no physical injuries.
No physical injuries, apart from just really shook and scared at the moment. It's been about 50 people confirmed injured by bullets and shrapnel. And then also there's been 19 people confirmed dead on the scene.
Were people being injured as you were all trying to leave? Because you were heading to the main exit, then you turned around and went back towards smaller exits. Were people being...
Yeah, people have been trampled. There was blood all over the floors as we were leaving. People have been trampled, they've been shot, there's been shrapnel hitting them, as in regards of nails, bullets. And people have just been trampled trying to get out and crushed trying to get out the doors.
It sounds like hell.
Well and truly, hell.
Jessica Howe, who was at the concert. As people fled for their lives, emergency service personnel cared for casualties and police began to clear the area. Reports of another explosive device came in, incorrect, and the journalists who began to arrive within minutes of the explosion were increasingly kept back from the arena. One of them was ITV's Jam Williams-Thomas.
Well, as you can hear above me, there's helicopters circling us. They've been circling us for the past couple of hours. Also, lots of police still flying through the area, lots of ambulances still flying through the area. The police cordon has just gotten a bit bigger as well, so everyone's being pushed away further and further. And as I was stood there earlier, there was still a few Ariana Grande fans, I assume concert goers, as I had the T-shirts on, walking past looking very, very visibly shaken at tonight's event.
I was going to say, a lot of those fans, a lot of the people at the concert would have been young, right? Teenagers.
Yes, a lot of teenagers walking past, looking very shaken, hugging parents and things like that. You can probably hear the sirens now, still have been going for the past few hours, flying through where I've been stood. And we've been stood right next to the arena for most of the evening. And again, police now pushing people away. It looks pretty sort of deserted around the area now. Police, again, just trying to clear people away and warning people not to come into the area. But as I say, the sirens have been going for the past few hours, constantly non-stop, flying through, and obviously we've heard the reports of 19 fatalities, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's terrible. And Jam, the police, are there a lot of guns there? Are people behaving as if this were a terror attack?
Yes, well, we actually had reports of armed police just a bit further up near the cathedral. Armed police were swarming that area. There's been some pictures circulating on social media of that. So it's a very scary situation here, and it's very, very sad night for the people of Manchester.
Absolutely. Are you from Manchester, Jam?
I'm from Manchester, yeah.
Right, and
I actually used to work at the arena as well, so it's pretty sad. Very sad.
And so is there, at the back of your mind, is there a sense of possibility about something like this happening, or is it not something you've thought much about in Manchester previously?
Well, it's not. I mean, obviously, we have our history, with obviously the 1996 IRA bomb, and, with us being a massive city in England, I mean, some people are saying that it was inevitable that something like this was going to happen here in a city like this, a very multicultural city, and so a lot of people have been saying that it's been a long time coming, unfortunately. So in the back of my head, I mean, you always think you've got iconic landmarks like the Trafford Centre and places like that where a lot of people do go. So some people, from what I've heard, whispers, said, look, this has been coming for a while now. When I was a little younger, I used to work behind the bar there, so the place does hold a special place in my heart for that reason. One of the first places that I ever worked. So I've got a few friends who were working there tonight as well, but I've been in touch with them and they're safe. I've got a couple of cousins that are at the gig tonight as well, but luckily they are safe. By the grace of something, they are safe. So.
By the grace of something, Jim. And the terrible thing is that one imagines that it would have been, prior to this awfulness, a very happy, jubilant, glorious occasion, right? An Ariana Grande concert full of excited kids.
Indeed. And like I say, as I've been walking around the arena, which is now deserted, you see, a few very, very young children, wearing the Ariana Grande T-shirts, carrying balloons, things like that. Again, it's a complete opposite of what you'd expect at a place like that. Like you say, you've got all the jubilance, the joy and everything, and then for it to be tragically sort of cut like that. And, I have spoken to a couple of people. A colleague of mine left his apartment, he lives just nearby, left his apartment and did spot one person with a blood-drenched T-shirt. So, there were definitely harrowing scenes here tonight.
It's ITV reporter Jan Williams-Thomas. Just before we move on, although we will be back in Manchester later in the program, some kindness. Throughout Manchester, people wanted to help. Offers of accommodation and with public transport immediately stopped. Cabbies and Uber drivers took to the streets to help get people home. No meter on, no charges, just because it was the right thing to do. Zafir Ahmed, or Zaf, is an Uber driver. He was already in bed when he heard about what had happened, and he jumped in his car to see what he could do to help. A small way to stand up to hate.
It is, my friend. It's a sad loss of human life. For humans to do that to other humans, no matter who's doing it, I just can't understand doing that to another human being.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of this, but whatever happens, we will be redeemed by kindness at some levels. Af, is that why you're out? Is that why you're working, just to be as kind as you can?
Yeah, just basically do whatever you can. It's if you can't do that, one human can't do that for another human, then you're not a human, are you?
Zafir Ahmed, one of many Uber drivers who was working for free to get people home after the concert. We will be back in Manchester later in the program, and if there are any developments, anyone who is able to identify the identity of the person or group behind this attack, obviously we will update you immediately. It's 5:23. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ. National MP Alfred Ngaro has finally fronted up after making the controversial comments about ministers' attitudes towards their critics that could have ended a short-lived ministerial career. The Associate Housing Minister, Social Housing Minister, had to make sweeping apologies, including to his cabinet colleagues, after suggesting community agencies could put their funding at risk if they criticised the government. But the leader of the opposition says that's not enough. Mr Ngaro should be sacked. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
A contrite Alfred Ngaro finally fronted up to the media this morning, 10 days after making the comments at a National Party regional conference in Auckland. Mr Ngaro had warned there could be financial consequences for the Manukau Urban Māori Authority if its head Labour candidate Willie Jackson bagged the government on the campaign trail.
I own my words. I own the things that I've said and I take responsibility for them and I apologise.
Alfred Ngaro says government ministers do not make decisions based on agencies' political views and he regrets creating that impression.
The greatest disappointment that I have is the fact is that my comments and what I've said have let down the team, have let down the caucus, and have let down the Cabinet as well, because that isn't the view, I know, of this government. We've been working very hard with communities, we've got partnerships.
The Prime Minister says he did not ask Mr Ngaro to resign, nor was it offered. Bill English says he's a competent minister.
Despite the fact that his comments were comments that shouldn't have been made, the community sector has been broadly supportive of him. He's been around to talk to them, so I didn't think there was any need for him to consider resignation.
That assessment was rejected by the Labour leader Andrew Little.
What he was doing was calculated, it was deliberate, and he was trying to send a very clear message. You say anything against us, then I'll come after you in the next funding round.
Mr Little says Mr Ngaro should no longer be a minister.
Given his failure to understand and stand up for pretty basic standards, you don't go around threatening organisations who receive public money that if they don't toe the government line that they're going to be punished. That is outrageous for a Cabinet Minister to do that. In the absence of Alfred Ngaro tendering his resignation, showing he understands the gravity of what he's done, I think Bill English should dismiss him.
Mr Ngaro acknowledges he's fortunate to still have the backing of the Prime Minister and says he's working with community agencies to earn back their trust. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
Just before we move on, Pip was just saying in my earpiece, emails are already coming in about the cathedral. We haven't even covered it yet tonight. We did last night and we will again later in the program, but your feedback is already coming in. Thank you. 5:26. US President Donald Trump is to meet the leader of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, on the final day of his visit to the Middle East. Israel and the Palestinians have not held direct talks for more than 3 years. Mr. Trump acknowledges it is one of the toughest deals of all. He met with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and voiced his hopes for peace between Israel and the Palestinians, while at the same time continuing to attack Iran. The BBC's John Campbell is with the media entourage. He sent this report.
Even with his arrival on Air Force One, a small piece of history was made. The first ever direct flight between Saudi Arabia and Israel.
Hello, my friend.
There are no diplomatic relations between the two countries. He's here on an outreach programme. The self-proclaimed dealmaker is after what he calls the ultimate deal, peace between Israelis and Palestinians.
We have before us a rare opportunity to bring security and stability and peace to this region and to its people, defeating terrorism and creating a future of harmony, prosperity, and peace. But we can only get there working together. There is no other way.
After the warmth of his reception in Saudi Arabia, it seemed the whole Israeli ruling class had decamped to Ben Gurion Airport to make a public display of appreciation towards this country's most important ally. It was then on to Jerusalem, a still divided city whose future status will be hotly contested in any peace agreement. When Donald Trump was a candidate, he vowed that the US Embassy would be moving from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Now, under pressure from the Palestinians, that seems increasingly unlikely. As a candidate, he had nothing to say about settlement building in the West Bank. Now that he's president, he's urging Israelis to be cautious. It seems that the candidate and the president can be two different people. But symbols can be as important as words, and it won't have been lost on Israelis that Donald Trump became the first sitting US president to visit the Western Wall, one of Judaism's holiest sites. He paused and put a note into a crevice between the stones in a tradition going back centuries. He also went to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in the Old City, where it's believed that Jesus was buried and resurrected. The Trump mission to bring together the three great religions of Christianity, Judaism and Islam.
Hello.
This evening, Donald Trump went to have dinner at the Israeli Prime Minister's residence, and Benjamin Netanyahu was sounding unusually upbeat and positive about the future prospects.
For the first time in many years, and Mr. President, for the first time in my lifetime, I see a real hope for change.
But in the West Bank, talk of change and new beginnings seemed as far away as ever, as Israeli soldiers clashed with Palestinian protesters, some clearly unhappy about the president's visit.
That's the BBC's John Campbell reporting. You are with Checkpoint on RNZ. Thank you for being with us. Coming up on the program, the latest from Manchester. It is 6:30 in the morning. We are standing by for all official updates on what has happened and who may have been responsible. The UK Home Secretary Amber Rudd has just spoken and called the terror attack barbaric. Stephen Joyce prepares to deliver his first budget. Thursday, of course, Scott Dixon escapes injury after being robbed at gunpoint at a Taco Bell drive-through, and a call for the government to intervene to fast-track a Christchurch cathedral decision. By golly, you have opinions on that, and they are welcome. Don't forget, you can text us on any subject, 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. We're on Facebook, Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radioNZ.co.nz. The time, unbelievably, is 5:30. Amazing. And it is time for the 5:30 headlines.
The police are treating the blast that's killed 19 people at a pop concert in Manchester as a terror attack. Nearly 60 people were injured in the explosion at Manchester Arena, where the American singer Ariana Grande had been performing. The blast sparked panic as thousands rushed for the exits. Witnesses described being knocked from their feet and seeing dozens of people, including children, lying on the floor. Paramedics say they've treated people for shrapnel-like injuries. No militant group has claimed responsibility so far, but Islamic State supporters are celebrating on social media. Political leaders have suspended campaigning for the June 8th election. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade says there's no indication at this stage any New Zealanders have been killed or injured. The Associate Social Housing Minister, Alfred Ngaro, says his greatest regret after making controversial comments about community providers is letting down his cabinet colleagues. Mr Ngaro has fronted up to media more than a week after suggesting community agencies could put their funding at risk if they criticise the government. The Prime Minister, Bill English, is continuing to back Mr Ngaro, saying he did not ask him to resign, nor was it offered. Electronic monitors on ankles that can detect alcohol consumption are being trialled on about 50 high-risk offenders and others on bail in the northern region. A new law, which kicked in last week, allows the police and corrections to test people with abstinence conditions as part of their bail or sentence. New legislation has been introduced to Parliament that will mean tenants who cause damage will be liable for the cost of their landlord's insurance excess. And the Ministry for Primary Industries has put restrictions around a nursery in Te Kuiti in the King Country after myrtle rust was found on a plant, bringing the total number of cases to 16 nationally. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6.
Thanks, Katrina. Appreciate it. Let's turn to business news now with Giles Beckford, our business editor, who is beaming in from the Wellington newsroom. Welcome, Giles. A big company with a low profile making a significant purchase.
Indeed, this one is called EBOS, John. Now, you may not instantly recognise that name, but if I tell you that they own Red Seal, the health food supplements company, they own or part of Animate's animal care stores around the country, as well as significant pharmaceutical and chemist shop assets on both sides of the Tasman. They have become, in the space of a short time, a pretty big player. Now, they've just quietly bought themselves another company in Australia called HPS, which provides wholesale pharmaceutical services to private hospitals and prisons and clinics in Australia. And what I like about EBOS, and I think that it's quite widely admired amongst investors in the know in particular, is that it does its homework. It finds companies that have good management, good businesses that are complementary to its own, and it neatly clips them onto the EBOS group. It doesn't go in there, rip and bust, looking for that dreadful word synergies, which always means just sending people down the road. It says, you're a good company, you've got good staff, and that's why we're paying top dollar for you. And this seems to be...
Giles, you and I, we're showing our age here because we remember the asset rating and the especially around the late 80s, right? Yeah. So EBOS isn't doing that kind of stuff.
It's not doing any of that kind of stuff. It's headed by a man called Patrick Davies, who I've had a long chat today. He's slightly dry and laconic about it, and I say every time I talk to you, and that's about 4 times a year, you've just gone and bought something. And then you tell me, well, we'll just quietly get on with business. And they do. And that's what I like about this company. It's also got the standout virtue of it. It's a New Zealand company that's actually doing quite well by buying stuff in Australia and not making a real hash of it, as we have done, as we've seen in the past from Kiwi companies. So a good company. It's in the space of 5-6 years, it's gone from just under $1 billion turnover to nearly $8 billion. And I guarantee that very few of you will have heard its name, but it's one to certainly watch out for. Although if you're a professional investor, it's expensive to buy.
The Commerce Commission notched up another big court decision.
Well, I used to rail at the Commerce Commission because they had the Fair Trading Act and the misleading advertising laws to enforce, and they never seemed to do it. They always seemed to say, we'll wag a finger at them. But in the last few years, they seem to have found some, should we say, some moxie. And they're out there, they're chasing bandits and rip-off merchants, like the retail truck people that prowl certain parts of Auckland. Well, this latest one is a company that was selling basically fake alpaca and merino. It claimed that duvets and jerseys and the like and wraparounds were authentic alpaca and merino, and there was virtually none of it, if any, in fact, in those products. Right? They've racked up, and this was the surprising thing for me, they've had 11 prosecutions in this particular sphere alone in the past 5 years, and they've totaled $1.5 million in fines. Interestingly, a lot of the companies seem to have overseas connections aimed at ripping off tourists. Doesn't do our reputation any good, but at least I'm pleased to see that the Commerce Commission is finally flexing some real muscle in chasing bandits.
Thanks, Giles. What happened on the markets today?
Top 50 index, it was down 25 points at 7385, and the New Zealand dollar a bit stronger, 70.2 US cents, 93.7 Australian. Thing to watch out for tomorrow is Fonterra's milk price forecast. Somewhere around the current level of $6 a kilo of milk solids as a minimum is expected.
We look forward to discussing it with you tomorrow night. Giles Beckford, our business editor. After 8 years of being Bill English's sidekick, Stephen Joyce is poised to finally deliver his first budget. As speculation mounts, it will include shifting income tax thresholds and boosting the accommodation supplement. The Finance Minister himself still isn't giving away any clues about where money will be spent, though he says there won't be any election year bribes unveiled on Thursday. Here's our political reporter, May Heron.
In the back room of a large building in Petone, north of Wellington, Stephen Joyce watched his first budget fly off the printing machine. He says there's a bit of nerves and excitement.
I have been Bill's sidekick for 8 years, and this is the first time I've got to come to the printing company and see the budget being printed and also have the opportunity to sit in the lead chair.
2 years ago, the budget included the first increase in benefit rates in 43 years. And in 2014, an extension of free GP visits to all children under 13. But Stephen Joyce wasn't keen to discuss what this year's centrepiece might be today, playing the traditional pre-budget game of cat and mouse with the media, where questions are asked but never answered. Will there be a change to income tax thresholds? Is there an increase in the accommodation supplement? What about tweaks to working for families? Like his predecessor, Stephen Joyce was tight-lipped.
We just got to wait till Thursday. It's only 2 sleeps to go, so not long now. We'll just wait and see what happens.
But he says not everyone will get what they want.
Well, I've seen so many people requesting so much over the last few days. I think I'd have to deliver about 5 or 6 budgets on Thursday to meet all the expectations of different sector groups and so on. It's about balancing all the different concerns and interests that people have.
But opposition parties aren't shy in coming forward with ideas. Labour's finance spokesperson Grant Robertson says the budget needs to deliver for low-income earners.
Those families have been facing hugely increased rental costs, increased costs in the health system, increased costs just to keep their kids at school. The feedback I'm getting is they want those things sorted out.
The ACT leader, David Seymour, says he wants to see some tax relief.
Threshold changes are 8 years overdue. The average family is paying $500 in extra tax.
Bill English, who's an old hand at budgets, having delivered 8 of them, says Stephen Joyce will do a good job.
He'll be very responsible about the use of the surpluses. There's plenty of people lining up, creating speculation and expectations.
Stephen Joyce says he may perform some pre-budget rituals on Thursday, but when he was asked what they were, he responded with an answer that is all too familiar. You'll have to wait and see. From Parliament for Checkpoint, May Heron.
Coming up to 21 minutes to 6, the former head of Auckland City's downtown promotion agency who stole $2.5 million $2.5 million for the organisation is being released from prison 3.5 years early. Alex Sweeney was sentenced to 5 years and 7 months in prison for fraud and tax evasion in June 2015, but the parole board has decided to release the former head of Heart of the City in 2 weeks' time. Our Auckland court reporter Edward Gay has been covering this story. Have you got the parole board's decision, Eddie?
I have.
And so what are they saying? Well, first of all, what has Alex Sweeney been doing inside prison? I guess that's material in the parole board's determination.
That definitely came into it. The parole board made much of the fact that, they described him as being displaying excellent conduct, in their words. He's been helping prisoners with yoga and literacy programs. He's also got strong support from his family on the outside, prospects of a job inside a family business. They also made mention that he has no previous record. He's a minimum security prisoner. And he's in prison after filing these false invoices to Heart of the City from companies in his control. And this was because, as he said, he didn't believe he was being paid enough money at the time. He did this over a 10-year period, and he invested a lot of that money in properties which are tied up in family trusts. As well as the representative dishonesty charge, he's also admitted charges of tax evasion relating to $1.76 million of unpaid tax.
What was the total sum of money that we're talking roughly, Eddie?
Well, it's the 2.5 plus the 1.76. My maths isn't crash hot.
Yeah, but it's 4 mil,
yeah,
isn't it?
it's over 4 mil.
Yeah, okay. And he got 5 years and 7 months. This is his first appearance before the parole board.
That's right.
And I know you don't like to editorialise in any way, shape or form, and so I'm not going to ask you to, but is it somewhat surprising it's parole at first with no previous record and all of that kind of stuff? It's not. No.
Oh, it's a difficult one.
Well handled, Eddie. Excellent. Alex Sweeney himself told the board he really wants to change his life.
Yeah, that's exactly what he said. He said he wants to live a downgraded lifestyle, but he still wanted to provide for his family despite being adjudicated bankrupt. He's voluntarily spoken to a psychologist. He's had 12 sessions, and the psychologist believes he's gained some insight into his offending. He's begun to understand why he's offended. The parole board said basically the risk that he poses to the community can be managed inside the community. They've imposed some conditions, some special conditions. He has to see a counsellor. He's not allowed to give financial advice. He can't be employed or involved in a business or a trust without permission from his parole board parole board officer.
Absolutely. Yeah. Many people know him, of course. He had a reasonably high profile. He was media friendly, always available for an interview.
He was, and he was always, you could always spot him driving around town on his orange Vespa. He spent 2 decades basically in the spotlight as the promoter for Auckland CBD. And there were a number of attempts that he made to break into local politics. He stood for the Waitemata board seat. He was also for the ACT Party as well, and he was the man around town. He often the go-to guy for stories on everything from footpaths to local business stories as well.
Edward Gay, who has been looking at this with his usual magnificently straight bat. Thanks so much, Eddie. Appreciate it. Lovely to see you as always. A jury has heard how phones were tapped and cocaine was replaced with flour inside a horsehead sculpture as part of an undercover operation that netted a record haul of the drug. Ronald Cook Sr. and Augustin Suarez have pleaded not guilty at the High Court in Auckland to importing 35 kilos of cocaine inside a jewelled horsehead statue in May last year. Charges were withdrawn last week by police against a third man. Our reporter Carla Penman was at court.
$14 million worth of cocaine was found hidden inside a horsehead statue by Customs when it arrived in New Zealand from Mexico on May the 10th last year. In opening the Crown case, prosecutor David Stevens says Customs found 35 packets, each containing 1 kilogram of the drug.
34 replica packages were then prepared by Customs to replace the cocaine that had been removed. Those packages were filled with flour instead of cocaine. The 35th package was constructed from polystyrene. Metal rods were inserted to replicate the weight and size of the original.
David Stevens says an electronic tracking device was also put in, along with 6 grams of actual cocaine, for the sake of ensuring that the accused were caught still committing a crime.
All 35 of the replica packages were then placed into the horsehead, which was repacked into a wooden crate and made to look as if it had not been interfered with.
It was then delivered to its intended destination, a storage unit in Onehunga. Mr Stevens says the men didn't arrive in New Zealand until the end of May.
Mr Cook spoke with the immigration officer on behalf of both of them. He said they were in New Zealand on holiday for 6 days to go diving.
Mr Stevens says when the pair returned about a month later, they bought power tools to remove the drugs from the statue. He says audio devices police had installed in the house picked up the noise and a discussion about meeting a buyer that afternoon.
They took packages from the horsehead in Te Atatu to the Crown Plaza Hotel in the Orange Bucket, where they met with Mr Enchondo. The only reason the deal was not completed was because Mr Enchondo opened the package. Instead of cocaine, they discovered an electronic device. They threw the package away in the Crown Plaza car park. It was later seized by a customs officer.
Mr Stevens says the pair panicked and fled to the airport, where they were arrested in the departure lounge. Both lawyers for the accused say their clients didn't know what was in the packaging at the time. And Mr Juarez's lawyer, Peter Kay, went further.
The other important aspect, though, is whether or not he had any control or a say in what happened to the contents of those packages.
The trial's been set down for 4 weeks, with the Crown expected to call close to 60 witnesses. In Auckland, for Checkpoint, Korkala Penman-Tene.
Coming up to 14 minutes to 6. Last night we looked at the future of the Christchurch Cathedral. We asked for your feedback and it was extraordinary. Views on what should happen to the famous building is sharply divided, as everyone in Christchurch knows, of course. But there was consensus on one thing, that some kind of decision needs to be made quickly. And today that call's been echoed by a group calling for the government to intervene and fast-track a decision on the building's future. The Greater Christchurch Buildings Trust warns if the government doesn't step in and force a decision before September, the historic quake-damaged building will remain in a state of decay for years to come. Maya Burry is with the story again.
In December 2015, the Anglican Church and the government announced a working group would be set up to break the impasse between the two parties over the cathedral's fate. Its report, due out shortly, is expected to support restoration. But now the Anglican Church has announced the building's future should be decided by the clergy and laity who use it at a synod meeting in September. The Greater Christchurch Buildings Trust co-chair, Philip Burden, does not believe there will be a resolution in 4 months' time, and he's urging the Crown to step in.
This is ridiculous. It's dragged on for 6 years. The Church clearly has absolutely no ambition whatever to resolve this issue. If we do not have government intervention to at least facilitate a resolution and allow restoration to commence and take place, we're going to have this symbol of decay and neglect sitting in the centre of the city for years to come.
Mr Burden says the government should be using its legislative powers to impose a decision on the cathedral's future that then must be acted upon by law. But the minister supporting Greater Christchurch Regeneration, Nikki Wagner, says it has no intentions to do that.
At this stage, we're not considering that. The government wants a good solution for all Christchurch people. It's very divisive, and they need to come to that solution together.
Mr Burden says the minister is currently sitting on the sidelines.
The government really has got to respect the fact that they are government and that they can exercise an initiative. And this simply is utterly unsatisfactory for Nikki to really, in effect, wash her hands of it, because that is not going to get a solution.
Ms Wagner says she understands the September meeting is the bishop's preferred option for a decision on the future of the cathedral. But she says she will continue working with the church and others to find a solution as quickly as possible. The Labour Party's Canterbury spokesperson, Megan Woods, says there needs to be more leadership on the issue.
What is the government going to do to show the kind of leadership that Christchurch desperately requires around this issue? We know we've got a report that the taxpayers spent $500,000 bringing together. Sitting there, I want to see the contents of that report, but something has to happen. We simply cannot go on indefinitely without having a resolution around the cathedral.
The Anglican Church has declined repeated requests to be interviewed or to comment on government intervention. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Maya Burry.
We should say off the back of that Maya has tried very hard to get someone from the church to front. Bishop Victoria Matthews, we would love to talk to you. We promise you a fair, two-eyed, open-minded hearing. We would really love to hear from you on Checkpoint. And we should say the feedback is, once again, just... raining in. Matt says, hi, listening to Checkpoint. My 2 cents is please don't give any taxpayer, ratepayer money to a non-taxpaying and non-ratepaying organisation. Thanks. Ray, who says lovely things. Thank you, Ray. Also says, I'm ashamed of the church in which I was brought up. I'm tired of the church's property trust and the bishop's delay tactics. I want the cathedral impasse to be broken and I want progress on restoration of the cathedral to begin now. So that's Ray, but then Kay says, I would like the cathedral demolished and a new modern one built somewhere else. It would allow everyone more time to argue their cases in the square to move ahead with a clear vista eastward. This would open up the square and remove the marked difference between east and west of the square. So once again, lots of feedback, and once again, it is strongly divided. We appreciate hearing from you, which is not what Scott Dixon said when he was at Taco Bell. Scott Dixon, who won pole position for next weekend's Indy 500 at the weekend, was robbed at gunpoint, of course, just hours after winning pole position while going through the drive-through at the local Taco Bell. Dixon was in the car with former IndyCar driver Dario Franchitti near the Indianapolis Motorway Speedway. Fellow driver Tony Kanaan described the incident to reporters.
While they're ordering with the windows down, 2 guys approached them at gunpoint and put a gun on Dixon's head and asked him for his wallet and his phone. I guess he didn't have his phone. He had his wife's wallet because he had left his wallet in our transport and it was locked already. And so he gave them the wallet. Nobody was injured in the incident, and 2 teenagers aged 14 and 15 have been arrested and charged by police. Scott Dixon, who of course won a pole position for next weekend's Indy 500, which is a pretty big deal. A Christchurch swim school fears private businesses will lose out if a council proposal for free swimming lessons goes ahead. Free lessons are one of the options the council is proposing as part of its draft annual plan. Other options include lowering the cost for low-income families so they have greater access to swimming lessons. Logan Church reports.
Jenny Jones and Huia Mikara have run Canterbury Swim School for the last 4 years and are getting ready for the after-school swimming lesson rush. They want more children to have access to swimming lessons, but are concerned about the council's proposal to offer subsidised swimming lessons at council-owned pools.
It's not about us, protecting our little patch or anybody else's little patch. Of course, we've got a business that we need to look after as well, but it's making sure that actually the funding is targeted to where it's required and to the right people and on a level playing field. That's all we're actually asking.
SwimSafe New Zealand's chief executive, John Mills, says swim safety is a serious issue in New Zealand. He says it's important that all children have access to swimming lessons, regardless of whether they can afford them or not.
Well, what we're seeing across the aquatic sector are lower levels of participation through the aquatic education system, and often it is in the lower socioeconomic areas where the alternative is private swimming lessons, and in many cases they can't afford them.
Genia and Huia agree, but they say the funding would be better used in an existing sports program the council already uses to subsidise swimming lessons. Their swim school has 900 students a week, many coming from schools who use the Kiwi Sport program to subsidise the cost. Huia Mikara says the council needs to focus its funding on this program, as it will be accessible to all businesses, not just council-owned pools.
That offer should be made at all pools, with the private pools having access to the same type of funding as council, which they're not. Council are in a fortunate position where they have the support of the public, and they're able to raise funds via rates.
But the council's head of recreation, sports and events, John Filsell, says the potential funding will be more like a grant, which private swim schools may be able to access.
Our Kiwi Sport partners, in terms of clubs, groups, schools, Sport Canterbury, we would use those same relationships in a very, very similar manner to ensure this funding went to the right place.
But Jenny Jones says the council doesn't have the correct figures. The council says free lessons would cost ratepayers $50,000 a year, but Ms Jones says that doesn't make any sense.
If it was $50,000, it's only going to equate to 4,000 lessons a year. That's not 4,000 children, that's 4,000 lessons, which would only be benefiting 100 children per term annually.
John Filsell says there are still issues to be worked out, but he agrees the original public consultation wasn't clear enough when it came to the numbers.
Community members have come and spoke to the council and they've submitted, and now the council have asked for clarification. So it's done its job in terms of raising the issue, generating debate. Has it provided enough information to totally answer everyone's question? Look, no, it hasn't.
Submissions on the proposed options have now closed, and final feedback will be presented to the council next month. In Ngātautahi for Checkpoint, Ko Logan Church, Chennai.
One of our wonderful regular listeners, Paul Lecomte, on the cathedral, nothing less than full restoration. I will stand in front of the bulldozers. Mental health, much in the news of late. Well, the New Zealand man will, in around 45 minutes, start bungee jumping off the Harbour Bridge. He aims to not stop for 24 hours. What's that got to do with mental health? Well, Mike Hurd is trying to reclaim the record for the most bungees in a day. He set it in 2008, but was beaten in 2014 by a man who jumped 151 times in 24 hours in Dubai. But Mike Hurd's not doing it for glory. He's raising money for the Mental Health Foundation. He hopes to have hit 50 grand. Our reporters, Zach Fleming and cameraman Brad White, walked up the Harbour Bridge in Auckland today to meet him at the launch pad and to ask him why exactly bungee jumping.
The first one's kind of like breathing underwater for the first time. It's strange, you know. There's a little switch in your brain that says, I know this isn't quite right, but I'm going to do it anyway. And once you get past that and you can go onto that second jump, or your third jump or your fourth jump, you really start to enjoy it, and I think you can really appreciate it for what it is. So I started jumping with the Asia Heka guys about 13, 14 years ago, had an absolute blast. It turned into, hey, let's have a crack at a record. We did it, got a great feeling. We did it again in 2011, and now it's redemption. You know, we want to bring this record back home to the birthplace of bungee jumping, and we want to make it difficult for someone to take it from us.
Yeah, you talked about how you feel after your third or fourth jump. How are you expecting to feel after your 200th jump?
Oh, maybe a numb bottom. I don't know. Yeah, look, I think my body's definitely going to be sore in a few places, particularly this is the harness I'm wearing, so you can see I've got chest straps here. It goes down to quite a thick waistband, the back, and then these leg straps. So as you go through the motions of jumping, the harnesses pulls in different places. So I'm sure I'll be feeling a little bit tender in some of those spots. But for me, it's more of a mental game and trying to get my brain in a place where, you know, each time I need to make that jump, I'm feeling good about going over the edge. If you've ever been lucky enough to come and jump at one of these sites, you'll see the way that the crew interact with the people, you know, the public that are doing the jumps. They're very supportive, they're pushing them off the edge without forcing them. So these guys are going to have my back, and it's going to be a team effort. Yeah.
In this 12 hours, 24 hours that you're doing this, are you attached to the rope the entire time and you're jumping, being pulled back up, jump off, pull back up? So it's a pretty big effort from the guys up here as well as not just your body physically.
Yeah, so you'll see over to the side here, the guys are currently preparing my cord. So this is a cord that's been made specially for this attempt. It's got 500 jumps on it. We're going to use a selection of hardware which is slightly different to what the public would have. So they would use sort of screw gate carabiners. We're going to use a more permanent way of fixing the cord on. It'll be like my umbilical cord. I'll be stuck to it. Yeah. We're going to be married. I've already had a wee kiss with the bungee cord, and
don't tell the wife.
So she went all right. Yep, no, it was good. So I'll need to take it off if I need to go to the toilet or have something to eat or feel like a rest.
And then everything going all right, you hope to have 200 jumps in the can around just after midnight?
Ooh, I'd love to have the record. So by midnight, the current record's 158. So I would love to have that 159th jump by midnight. Yeah.
Do you have a firm stopping point where you'll go, I think this record is pretty unbreakable now, I'm gonna stop it?
I'm not gonna stop when I'm tired. I'll stop when I'm done. So I've got no number.
Mike Hurd, who's doing it to raise money for the Mental Health Foundation, he hopes to hit 50 grand. It's been a tough old day today, very sad with what happened in Manchester. So we're just going to try and brighten us up momentarily with something cute and cheerful. A rare black rhinoceros has been born is much more important, at the St. Louis Zoo. Video released by the St. Louis Zoo shows the male calf named Moyo standing up on shaky legs just moments after his birth. Moyo has been trailing his mother Katie Rain around their enclosure, and the two appear to be bonding well. Black Are critically endangered, with as few as 5,000 believed to exist in the wild. Illegal poaching is blamed for the decline in the black rhino population, and poachers have often sought to sell their horns for use as medicine in Asia. While the practice has been outlawed for decades, conservationists say they have seen an uptick in recent years. While video of the moyo, whose name means heart, birth in Swahili, has generated interest in the newborn calf, zoo officials haven't yet set a date for his official debut. He is extremely cute. I'm sorry if we were talking over the top of that. Let's build something stunning but modern, incorporating parts of the cathedral. The dollars required to rebuild is ridiculous. The cathedral was not the heart of the city. Welcoming people and beauty make a city, says Sue. The cathedral is not a public building. Why is it a public issue? Leave it to the church to build the church, says Melanie. We love the huge breadth of feedback on the issue of the cathedral. It's 6 o'clock.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The British Prime Minister Theresa May is calling a blast at a pop concert in Manchester that's killed 19 people an appalling terror attack. Nearly 60 people were injured in the explosion at Manchester Arena, where the American singer Ariana Grande was performing. The blast sparked panic as many of them children and teenagers, rushed screaming for the exits. Dozens of parents frantically searched for their children, posting photos and pleading for information on social media. There'd been no immediate claim of responsibility, but American officials have drawn parallels to the coordinated attacks in November 2015 by Islamist extremists on the Bataclan concert hall and other sites in Paris. Ariana Grande later tweeted she was broken, saying, "From the bottom of my heart, I am so sorry. I don't have words." Concert goer Jessica Howe, a 21-year-old student vet, has described how people were trampled as panicked concert goers tried to rush out of the doors of the arena. She told Checkpoint she was heading for the exit when the explosion happened, and then everyone turned back towards her. She says people were screaming and running towards the stage before she managed to get out of a back entrance just as a second explosion happened.
There was blood all over the floors as we were leaving. They've been shot, there's been shrapnel hitting them, as in regards of nails, bullets, and people have just been trampled trying to get out and crushed trying to get out the doors. One person with their whole T-shirt just covered in blood, and someone also shot in the stomach.
Jessica Howe says she and many other concert goers have been taken to a nearby hotel, which is now in lockdown. Electronic monitors on ankles that can detect alcohol consumption are being trialled on some high-risk offenders and those on bail. A new law, which kicked in last week, allows the police and corrections to drug test people with abstinence conditions as part of their bail or sentence. About 50 of the anklets, which can detect alcohol on a person's sweat, are being trialled in the northern region over 2 years. The Corrections Minister, Louise Upston, says the technology will help reduce drug and alcohol-related harm in the community. She says offenders will also be subject to urine and breath alcohol tests. New legislation has been introduced to Parliament that will mean tenants who cause damage are liable for the cost of their landlord's insurance excess. The bill is in response to a Court of Appeal ruling that meant landlords were liable for any damage accidentally caused by tenants, whether or not they had insurance. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell.
The Building and Construction Minister says the changes are needed to ensure tenants have an incentive to take good care of a property, and so landlords get appropriate insurance. Nick Smith says under the new law, tenants would be liable for the excess cost of up to a maximum of 4 weeks' rent for each incident of damage. The bill would also give landlords easier access to tests for methamphetamine, and tenants would be able to terminate their tenancy if methamphetamine is found at unsafe levels at the property. Atueti Whare Pārimata, ko Chris Bramwell aho.
The former head of Auckland's Downtown Promotion Agency will be released from prison after serving less than half his sentence for stealing $2.5 million from the organisation. Alex Sweeney was sentenced in 2015 to 5 years and 7 months for fraud and tax evasion. However, the parole board is allowing him out 3.5 years early. According to the board's decision released today, Sweeney has helped fellow prisoners with yoga and literacy. It says he also has strong support from his family and prospects working for a family business when he's released. Sweeney told the board he's prepared to live what he calls a downgraded lifestyle, but still wants to provide for his family despite his bankruptcy. The board says Sweeney has also voluntarily undergone sessions with a psychologist. He's due to be released in 2 weeks. A jury has heard how the police and customs tricked 2 men accused of smuggling a record amount of cocaine into New Zealand by switching flour for the drug. Ronald Cook Sr. and Augustin Juarez have pleaded not guilty in the High Court in Auckland to importing 35 kilograms of cocaine hidden inside a bejewelled statue of a horse head in May last year. The police have estimated the drug's street value at $14 million. The Crown Prosecutor David Stevens told the jurors customs found the cocaine in the horse head when it arrived, replacing all of the packets except one with flour and putting in a tracking device.
The 35th package was constructed from polystyrene. Metal rods were inserted to replicate the weight and size of the original. An electronic tracking device was also installed into that package, together with 6 grams of actual cocaine.
David Stevens says the men arrived in New Zealand on May the 31st to take the statue to a house they'd rented before leaving the country and returning a month later to sell the drug. It's 6:05. To sport, and All Whites coach Anthony Hudson says he's spoilt for choice in picking his side for the upcoming Confederation Cup in Russia. The 23-man squad will be named on Friday, but Hudson says he's pretty confident he knows who the final picks will be.
I'm probably 95% there of what I want to select. Look, it's a really good problem for me to have, to be able to be in this situation now where I'm looking at 1 or 2, and it's really hard because there's some players really close, but that's the position we want to be in.
Anthony Hudson. Simon Mannering has been named in the Warriors lineup to face the Broncos this weekend. Mannering is back after a hamstring injury sidelined him for the team's abysmal losses to the Panthers and Dragons. Coach Steve Kearney says Mannering's presence was missed in the last 2 matches, so it's good to have him back. Solomone Kata and Manu Vatave are still out of contention due to injuries. In rugby, the Western Force veteran Matt Hodgson says players have been left mentally shot by the continuing uncertainty surrounding the franchise's future. Hodgson says the Australian Rugby Union's announcement will axe either the Force or the Melbourne Rebels has caused chaos. He says the situation is at breaking point, with both teams considering legal action as they fight for their survival. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Adrian Bingham talks about the Daily Mail, the paper that foretold the First World War. Was it the one that stoked it? We have a window on the world of elephants and their sometimes uneasy coexistence with people in Sri Lanka. And this week's pundit, our religious scholar Douglas Pratt, presents a brief history of fundamentalism in New Zealand on Nights with me, Brian Crump, from after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland, Auckland and Coromandel. Mostly cloudy, isolated showers developing overnight, becoming widespread in Auckland and Coromandel tomorrow evening. Waikato to Kapiti, including Taupo, Taumarunui and Taihepe, scattered showers turning to rain overnight with some heavy falls in the Tararua Ranges, clearing from the south tomorrow, then fine. Bay of Plenty, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, often cloudy, scattered showers tomorrow, clearing Bay of Plenty from evening. Wellington, Wairarapa, Marlborough and Nelson, a few showers turning to rain this evening, clearing from the south overnight, isolated showers tomorrow, mainly coastal. Bulla to Fiordland, a few showers in Fiordland, but rain further north, briefly heavy, becoming mainly fine everywhere tomorrow, but patchy drizzle in Bulla later. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, scattered showers, clearing tomorrow and becoming fine, and the Chatham Islands, a few showers. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. We started at 5 o'clock with a death toll of 19 people in Manchester. The latest reports we have are 20 people dead. The Guardian are now saying police have confirmed 22 people dead. Another 60 plus injured in that explosion at the Manchester Arena. Police have announced in the last few minutes also that the attack was carried out by a male suicide bomber. Witnesses reported hearing a loud bang in the venue at the end of an Ariana Grande concert and described seeing nuts and bolts strewn across the floor and the smell of explosives. The British Prime Minister Theresa May has described it as an appalling terrorist attack. And Downing Street says an emergency cabinet meeting is expected in a couple of hours' time. From Manchester, the BBC's Greg Dawson with this report.
This is the moment a concert arena filled with young people transformed into a scene of confusion and panic. In the chaos, thousands of people immediately scrambled for the exits.
I was like, we need to run. So we started running. We ran straight out the doors, all the way down to the hotel. And all I could hear was screaming, people crying. Everyone was just running everywhere. It was completely madness.
Police say they believe the explosion happened in the foyer of the arena and they're treating it as a terrorist attack.
Officers from Greater Manchester Police and Emergency Services are working at the scene and are supporting those affected. We are coordinating the operation here at Greater Manchester Police headquarters.
The Manchester Arena is the city's biggest indoor venue, with a capacity of around 18,000 for concerts. Many of those attending last night were children.
I was near the box office on the foyer where it happened, waiting for my family to come out. I was talking to one of the girls who was going on about she's going away with the kids and that. I was talking about Florida and that. Only for her talking to me and having the door open, I think I'd have been injured. But because she had the door open, we got thrown forward through the door towards the arena. But the explosion was behind us, forced us forward. But everyone who was 7 foot, 15 foot behind us, every one of them got injured.
At least 60 ambulances were sent to the venue, with the injured taken to hospitals right across the city. Hours later, Ariana Grande tweeted the words, "Broken, from the bottom of my heart. I am so, so sorry. I don't have words." The singer wasn't hurt in the incident. When she walked off stage, she left behind a venue filled with euphoria. Just moments later, it was transformed into a scene of multiple deaths.
That's the BBC's Greg Dawson. The attack is likely to be the deadliest in Britain since 52 people were killed in suicide bombings on London's transport system in 2005. The blast, of course, came 2.5 weeks ahead of an election which Prime Minister Theresa May has predicted by opinion polls to win a large majority, but most affected aren't even old enough to vote in that election. The majority of Ariana Grande's fans are, unsurprisingly, in their teens, buzzing from seeing a musician they love. Cell phone footage shows it took most around 20 seconds for the realisation to sink in that, yes, what they'd just heard was an explosion. Here are two girls describing the immediate aftermath, Anna and Kennedy.
I was like, we need to run. So we started running. We ran straight out the doors, all the way down to the hotel. And all I could hear was screaming, people crying. Everyone was just running everywhere. It was completely madness.
We looked at each other and then we were like, no, it can't be something that you see on the news all the time, that doesn't happen to people like us. And then all of a sudden, everyone just started screaming and running in every direction. And there was one girl, diagonal, wasn't there?
She tumbled.
She tumbled from over the seats.
She went over about three seats.
Oh,
she went with such a force.
And then we made our way out, and there were lost shoes and lost phones.
And lost children. The Chief Constable Ian Hopkins has just confirmed children are among the 22 people confirmed to have died. Many of the 20,000 concert goers were on the cusp of being allowed to go to things unsupervised. Around 17, 18-year-olds. Videos show parents outside the stadium hoping their child runs past in the mayhem. Meanwhile, other parents waited anxiously back at hotels. Elizabeth is the mother of Anna, the first girl we just heard from.
We were in our room, me and my husband, and they just beat it down the door and fell in when they opened it. They'd run all the way down the road, all the way up the flights of stairs in the hotel, and just basically fell in the doorway.
Meanwhile, hundreds of other children whose cell phones had no battery took shelter with locals. One hotel took in more than 50 children. Parents were desperately turning up to see if their kids were there. Let's go back to what Chief Constable Hopkins is saying. He says that the attacker died in the explosion. He says that while police believe the man was acting alone in the attack, investigations are ongoing to establish if he was part of a network. He says police believe the man was carrying an improvised explosive device which he detonated, causing this atrocity. ITV journalist Adam McLean arrived on the scene soon after the explosion. He says Manchester, a city usually full of swagger, felt empty and eerie. Adam told me while there have been terrorist attacks like there before the IRA, of course, they have been nothing like this.
This doesn't happen in Manchester. We see emergency services preparing for this kind of things. We've seen training exercises at local shopping centres for terror attacks and for responding to huge incidents. But in something that actually kills people, that injures lots of people, and by the sound of it, lots of young people that wanted to spend their night watching a music concert and tonight have witnessed things that they will never forget. And those families too, that there are people that aren't coming home tonight. It's eerie, it's odd. Manchester has a very unusual energy about it at times. Usually this is a place that has a swagger, and right now it's quite odd. I'm about 500 metres from the scene of the arena. We've been pushed further and further back over the course of the evening, and right now here at the outer cordon, it's very quiet. It is very quiet here now, and there were at first lots of people keen to know what was going on, and then when they heard exactly what had happened, they were incredibly shocked to learn that people had been killed in this attack and that many more had been wounded.
How quickly after the attack did you arrive there? Obviously you just received a call or notification on your phone and just went straight to the arena, did you?
It was about 10:35 UK time that the explosion happened. Very shortly after that, I got the call. I live in Manchester city centre, so it was a quick run across the city. I was there maybe 15 minutes after that blast, and I witnessed that scene of panic of, I turned up and there were two things that made it quite clear that this was very different, that this was odd, that there was something very serious happening. And the first of which was a police officer outside the arena shouting for the walking wounded to identify themselves, to make themselves known to the emergency services. So that began to paint a picture of a very serious situation. And then very shortly after, armed police officers were running away from the arena and conducting a search and a sweep of the area. Manchester has, in recent memory, had to deal with a bomb in the past. In 1996, the IRA left a bomb in a van that went off. It didn't kill anybody, but it did injure people. It does evoke that kind of response. It was after that Manchester picked itself up, dusted itself off, and regain that spirit that this city is known for. And it is different. We have tonight a huge loss of life, and there are lots of questions. People are asking why, how, and why this particular concert, a pop concert that attracts a very young audience. Speaking to a local politician, he said he can only imagine the kinds of stories that we're going to hear over the next few days of the victims, the faces and the people that have lost their lives tonight. We're young people with lives ahead of them. This city has picked itself up after acts of terror in the past. This isn't something, though, that Manchester is used to dealing with. It is. It hasn't had that 7/7 style attack that affected London. This is the first time that I think this particular kind of incident has affected this part of the country, and I think this city is in shock. Lots of people are doing an awful lot tonight to reach out and help and come together. We've had stories of taxi drivers taking injured people to hospital, people offering their homes, hotels, taking children that were at that concert in and looking after them. So really now it's about immediately helping those affected, and in the long term, beginning to think how will we deal with it. Manchester has dealt with acts of terrorism in the past. I'll bet a different kind of terrorism, but it's odd. It feels quite surreal talking to you tonight about what has happened in a place I call home.
Anna McLean, who is an ITV reporter, just confirming the official death toll is now 22, including children. New Zealand Prime Minister Bill English has condemned the attack a short time ago. Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull described the attack in Parliament as, I quote, especially vile, especially criminal, especially horrific, because it appears to have been deliberately directed at teenagers. This is an attack on innocence. Surely there is no crime more reprehensible than the murder of children. This is a direct and brutal attack on young people everywhere, on freedom everywhere. It is 90 minutes past 7 in the morning in Manchester. A short time ago, the UK's Home Secretary Amber Rudd called the attack barbaric and horrific.
Later on this morning, I will be attending COBRA, chaired by the Prime Minister, to collect more information, to find out more about this particular attack. And I can't comment any more on that at the moment. The public should remain alert but not alarmed, and if they have anything to report, they should approach the police. But I have two further things to add. The great city of Manchester has been affected by terrorism before. Its spirit was not bowed, its community continued. This time it has been a particular attack on the most vulnerable in our society. Its intention was to sow fear, its intention is to divide, but it will not succeed.
Amber Rudd, the UK Home Secretary, of course, also just confirming before we move on that police have said there was one suicide bomber involved in the attack. They do not know yet whether he, and the gender is correct, had any kind of organisation behind him. Let's head home. A schoolboy has described his disbelief when a doctor touched him sexually while he was sedated. The young man gave evidence in David Kang Huat Lim's trial in the Napier District Court today. Dr Lim is charged with stupefying and indecently assaulting 4 male patients in 2014 while he was working at the Doctors' Clinic in Hastings. Michael Kropp is covering the trial.
The first patient to complain about Dr Lim was an 18-year-old schoolboy who visited the clinic in September 2014 because he had dislocated his pinky finger. Dr Lim administered the sedative midazolam and, with the help of a nurse, relocated the finger. He then sent the nurse away while he monitored the patient's recovery. The young man, whose identity is suppressed, told the court when he woke up his school trousers had been removed and a towel had been wrapped around his waist. Later, in a darkened consultation room, he said he could remember Dr Lim touching his genitals through his underwear. He said Dr Lim also touched him intimately when he had to urinate. He said he thought it was a dream at the time, but later felt disgusted and embarrassed. But Dr Lim's lawyer, Harry Walkins QC, said the young man was still under the effects of the sedation, which can cause hallucinations. Mr Walkins said the young man told Dr Lim he was hot and asked for his trousers to be taken off, and that Dr Lim had to help the young man urinate because he was making a mess.
You were urinating over the, not in the bowl, weren't you? You were urinating on the floor. Do you remember that? Do you remember that you weren't holding your penis? And that was why the doctor held your penis to direct the urine into the bowl. Do you remember that?
He said he did not remember, and that he'd put his trust into the doctor, yet the doctor didn't ask his permission to touch him like that. The nurse assisting Dr Lim, Anna McKinley, said the doctor's bedside manner was almost flirtatious.
He was making a lot of eye contact. He was laughing, giggling. He's prancing around, being very expressive with his hands. I would call it flirtatious.
After the procedure and after she had been sent away, Ms McKinley said she heard the boy call out from within the cubicle.
In a very distinct, clear voice, "Why are you touching my balls?" I went on to autopilot, pulled the curtain back, noticed a stunned look on Dr Lim's face. It's like a child being caught with his hand in the cookie jar.
Mr Walken suggested to Ms McKinley she didn't like Dr Lim, and by describing him as flirtatious, she was trying to put a negative spin on his character. Ms McKinley said she was simply telling the jury the facts. She didn't find Dr Lim helpful or a team player, but she tried to get on with the job anyway. She also told the court she had never seen a doctor take a patient to the toilet, and if it had been her, she would have made sure the patient was seated so she did not have to touch his genitals. In Napier, Michael Crop there, nay.
6:23. In what human rights groups are describing as a new low, 2 men have been publicly caned in Indonesia's Aceh province this morning after being found guilty of having gay sex. The men received 85 lashes each. In a public spectacle usually meted out for gambling or drinking alcohol, Aceh is the only province in Indonesia where Sharia law can be enforced and where homosexuality is illegal. But in a further sign of the growing conservatism across the country, more than 100 men were arrested at a gay club in Jakarta on the weekend. The ABC's Samantha Hawley reports.
In Aceh, the punishment for moral misdeeds is public flogging with a cane. Drinking alcohol, adultery and public displays of affection outside a relationship are all criminal acts. 2 men receive 85 lashes each. Their crime, gay sex in their own home. Homosexual behaviour is rampant. Aoife Rockma from the hardline Islamic group Hezbollah Tahrir tells the ABC. It's now endemic. On the caning, she says the perpetrators may think it's a hefty punishment, but what about the next possible victims? Andreas Hazano from Human Rights Watch says there's been a conservative shift over many years.
It is really a new law for Indonesia. The problem is Aceh is to some extent seen as a role model for many conservative areas, Muslim conservative areas.
He says there's been growing anti-LGBT sentiment across Indonesia, particularly over the past 2 years. On the weekend, more than 140 men were arrested at a gay bar in Jakarta for pornography. Human rights groups demanded their immediate release. Instead, police released photos of the accused with their faces clearly visible.
In the last 5 years in particular, the rise of conservative hardliner groups such as those who led the attack on Ahok in Jakarta has also led to the targeting of gay men.
Tim Lindsay, the director of the Centre for Indonesian Law, Islam and Society at Melbourne University, says coupled with the jailing of Jakarta's governor, there's a shift underway.
There is a real question as to whether Indonesia's reputation for pluralism and tolerance can survive, or whether society in Indonesia has significantly shifted, as recent events suggest may be the case.
Professor Lindsay says Aceh's laws could be challenged in the Supreme Court in Jakarta, as they could breach the nation's human rights laws. But nobody's ever taken that step.
That's the ABC's Samantha Hawley reporting. We're going to return to the feedback we're getting on the cathedral in Christchurch. Second night running that you have inundated us with feedback, and we love hearing from you. Margaret Griffin says, hate to bother you more than once in a week. You'll not bother us as often as you like, Margaret. We've heard from 2 sides, restore and rebuild new. The rest of us just want a resolution sooner rather than later. It's heartbreaking to drive through the square. It remains a symbol of hopelessness. Today, as we hear of senseless violence in Manchester, if we can't sort out a building challenge, what hope is there for us? Says Margaret. I think whatever side you take on this discussion, dispute or whatever, everyone wants a decision ASAP. AJ and DR Pike say Christchurch Cathedral is an important part of our history, and the present bishop should not have the power to rob us of our heritage. We have already lost so much in the earthquakes and their aftermath. Anything at all familiar has become a rarity. In my own family's case, all of the churches connected with our history are now gone. My grandfather was verger at the cathedral, and he died before I was born. It is the sole connection I feel with him. When I first started work catching the bus in the square, the cathedral was the one reassuring fixture amongst all the other changes going on. Without the cathedral, Christchurch is no longer Christchurch. Please give it back to us. Thank you for all of your feedback, whatever your point of view. We really enjoy hearing from you. Gosh, this is a divided issue. And once again, Bishop Victoria Matthews, we would love to talk to you about this on Checkpoint. It has been a crappy day, really. The worst of us seen in that suicide attack on kids going to a concert in Manchester, and so we thought we'd end tonight with the most inconsequential piece of escapism. We hope it cheers you up a little bit. The artist who holds the record for the world's most watched YouTube video, see if you can guess who it is, reckons he can do it again. Can he, with a new album 5 years on? The 2012 smash hit Gangnam Style remains the world's most popular video with 2.8 billion, yes, billion views. And artist Psy also holds the record for more than 10 million subscribers on his YouTube channel. Now, 5 years on, Psy believes New Face will be just as catchy. And if you don't remember the words to that one, and it's not bad enough for you, there is another one too. It's called I Love It.
I love it. 실력보단 매력이 I love it. 품격보단 파격이 I love it. 사치보단 가치가 좋아 I love it. 자신을 love it. 여러분도 love it. 앞이 양옆 사람들 I love you so much.
I Love It. Psy, who is now 41 and has 2 children, says after this album he'd like to focus more on music production and helping younger artists. He says as a singer he's achieved all he could ask for and more. And we think so too. Psy, Gangnam Style. Just before we go tonight, a reminder of the new details of the story of the day. Very sadly, police have now confirmed that at least 22 people were killed in the explosion at the Ariana Grande concert and Manchester Arena, and yes, some of them, as was inevitable given the audience, are children. Officers said that a further 59 people were injured amid reports of at least one explosion that hit the venue after the concert was finished. Thank you for being with Checkpoint tonight. We'll be back tomorrow at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The police have confirmed a lone suicide bomber detonated a device at a Manchester pop concert, killing 22 people, including children, and hospitalising at least 59. The Chief Constable, Ian Hopkins, says they're trying to find out if the attacker acted alone. Witnesses describe seeing nuts and bolts strewn across the floor after the explosion. Electronic monitors on ankles that can detect alcohol consumption are being trialled on offenders and those on bail. New legislation introduced today will make tenants who cause damage liable for their landlord's insurance excess. And the former head of Auckland's Downtown Promotion Agency will serve less than half his jail sentence for stealing $2.5 million from it. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Aldous Harding explores her extraordinary voice, or voice